Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Healthier Communities and Older People Overview and Scrutiny panel. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? No? Okay. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? You're doing very well. Item 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed? I take your silence as consent. I see some people nodding. Item 4 is the budget and business plan 2021, and we're going to have a verbal update from Caroline Holland, the Director of Corporate Services. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. I would also draw your attention to agenda item 8, which is the version of the business plan, which went to the September Cabinet. So I'm going to give a quick run through to show the progress that we've made and what we're planning to do going forward. So you will see that we started off when we went to Council in March this year with a gap of 3.3 million for next year, rising to 11 million over the course of the 4 years. We reviewed the assumptions as we normally do going forward. So we reviewed the pay inflation. We're lucky we had a 2.75% pay rise this year, which was slightly above what we had allowed for, and we had allowed for 2% going forward. However, we feel that with the cost of the pay and the impact on the economy, it's unlikely that there will be such generous levels of pay awards going forward. So we have taken the opportunity to reduce that down to 1.5%. Clearly, we will keep an eye on the things as we go forward to see if there's any news or any updates, but unlikely to be anything further, as it took quite a while to agree the pay rise for this year. And indeed, it was only paid in October. With regards to inflation, I think inflation has stayed relatively low, so we don't anticipate too much of a variance around the levels of inflation. And indeed, we have reduced the excess inflation that we had allowed for some contracts which may have come in above that. So we have released some of that budget to enable us to give some flexibility and to look to reduce the gap. Clearly, with COVID, there has been an impact on the spending review. So we thought there would be a 3-year spending review. The government has recently announced it will just be a 1-year spending review, and that will now be on the 25th of November, with the settlement for local government likely to be in the week commencing the 21st of December. So quite late for us to be able to work through the implications on what I think every year becomes more challenging, but I think this is most would agree a particularly challenging year, both service-wise and budget and finance implications-wise. There was also meant to be a fair funding review. So the spending review looks at the amount each departmental government department gets. The spending review and fair funding review then looks at how much is distributed to each authority and type of authority. That's now also been deferred. And the business rate retention scheme, there's not been brought in legislation to formally make the level of retention higher, but London has created a business rate pool, and we are looking to, in principle, to continue with that pool for next year as well. There were various grants assumed within the budget, and we set those out on page 13 for you. And at this moment in time, we have no indication that those assumptions are right or that they are wrong. So that's, I suppose, something I would say at this moment in time, that I can assure you that the gap that we come up with at the end of this process will be the wrong number, but it's based on the best information we have at this stage. We have assumed an increase of council tax at 2%, which is currently the maximum level allowed before you do a referendum. And there has been no announcement at this stage of a social care precept, which had previously been allowed for us to do, but we wait to see whether there would be any such announcement in the settlement when we get to that stage. So we have set out on page 15 of the report the amount of additional council tax the precept has given us to support adult social care. And another area of funding that we have to pick up, previously had to allow for, was the dedicated schools grant. We are in deficit on the dedicated schools grant, and previously we had set monies aside to offset this deficit. There is to be an announcement and regulations laid in the House of Commons regarding a override, but that will only be for this year. Going forward, we will still have the deficit of over 13 million to still consider, and there's been no news forthcoming from the DfE as to whether they will fund that for us. What we then showed with regards then was sort of an update in page, just trying to find the page now, on page 25 of what all those changes with the review of the capital programme. We did not allow any bids to come forward for capital programme other than those that would be funded by our strategic infrastructure levy, community infrastructure levy. So those have been coming forward to Cabinet in the September, October, and now the November monitoring reports to release monies to enable certain schemes to progress. But you can see before COVID, we would have had a gap of 1.3 million next year. However, we are not just pre-COVID. As I said at the beginning, COVID has had quite a devastating impact on our residents, on our services, and on the finances. So we looked at various options around would the reduction in income continue, and made various assumptions around that. Made assumptions around the level of savings that we currently have built into the medium-term financial strategy and current business plan. The staff have either been diverted elsewhere, or some of them do not make sense to be able to do at this stage. And then there are clearly some levels of growth required in certain parts of the business. So looking at the range of growth there, and also then at the size of that DSG deficit, whether we do provide for all of it or some of it. So as you can see, normally on page 26, I am of the you plan for the worst and hope for the best. But when I, with a gap of £33.5 million next year, thought that was too big a hurdle for us to face. So we said we'll work on the basis of the even level, because not everything will come to pass, and go forward on that basis. So we set savings targets for each department, and also made sure that any previous shortfalls in savings not achieved were carried forward, and set out what the new departmental targets were going to be, and have sent directors to go away and work those up. So we are hoping to bring some proposals forward to the November Cabinet, and the Commission will then get a chance to have their first look at them. Because of the scale of the challenge and uncertainty, it's just been really difficult, and obviously officers being involved in our response, difficult to get the level of detail of savings to a previous Cabinet. But that's why I made the offer to come and talk to you about the budget tonight, to then take you through what we're planning to do, and then see to have the opportunity at the Commission for when we do get some detail, and for further review of savings proposals in the new calendar year. So as an aside, we've also got a new service planning process. So normally at this second round of scrutiny, you have the 2-page service plans. I'm hoping that, and Hannah was leading on the review of the service plans, you will see vastly improved service plans with levels of detail to enable you to get a real feel of the services, and therefore tie in with the levels of savings, future directions of travel for those services, and key performance information to enable you to get a feel about the services that are being provided. So that was quite a brief run through. But sort of with the Appendix 2 then, which shows the level of detail around our current draft MTFS, that was what we took to the September Cabinet. We are looking to update this for the November Cabinet, but there is still so much uncertainty around the level of grant, level of council tax, level of if there is a precept, that we just wait to see what that further information will be. But happy to answer any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Could you just kind of take us back to what you were saying in relation to the pre and post-COVID scenario, which I think, what did you say it was on page 26?
35, we've got a table which shows sort of effectively pre-COVID impact.
Right.
So para 211D.
Okay, but you mentioned on page 26 sort of the going for the the even level,
Correct.
which gives us a gap of 16.737. And prior to that, what would it have been without COVID? What was it projected to be?
So if you go back to the previous page, then it would have been 1.304 million.
Okay.
So quite a significant difference there.
And my understanding is that at the beginning of this crisis, local authorities were urged to do whatever it takes by the government. So where's the money?
So certainly we are seeing money coming forward for the current financial year. However, at the beginning, it was clear that the money was only for 2020-21. What we've shown and set out in Para 211.4 are those areas where there are continued impacts. And that's what we are now hoping the spending review will pick up, but we're not assured of that at this stage. And I think with the level of support that is still being continued to give, it's unclear as to whether our loss of income and some of the assumptions we've made around our loss of income were before the announcement of the second lockdown. So we've also published month 6 monitoring report for Cabinet on Monday, and that had shown an improvement in parking income. But I'm not sure whether there will be a further deterioration in light of people and non-essential shops shutting. So therefore, there may be a further knock-on impact on what that might mean for us. So certainly there are resources coming in to offset this financial year, not still enough at this stage, but it's the ongoing impact of then savings not being achieved and growth still being required to deal with, for example, some elements of the housing response that we've had, particularly an increase in our temporary accommodation and the approach to rough sleepers with everybody in. So some of those will have an ongoing impact, and that's what we are trying to make sure that people and government officials are aware of that impact, and therefore if the Treasury will deal with that during the spending review, but we're not sure at this stage.
So can I be clear? Are you saying that the money that was going to be provided was only going to come in 21, or was there an element of funding from central government for 2020?
So certainly at the beginning of the crisis, all the money was purely for 2021. I think at the beginning, it was felt that it would not continue for as long as it had. So certainly as there's been further tranches, it has all been so to take you to the financial year end. And indeed the TfL support that MHCLG have given it is only again till the end of March 21. What we are trying to then say is there will be elements of our budget affected going forward, and the spending review should pick some of that up, and we're trying to make the case about that, but it's not guaranteed at this stage. And that's why with the spending review announcement at the end of November, our settlement in mid to late December leaves us very little time to actually then work out what the true position would be. So what we've set out is what we think the impact will be on us, hope that the spending review will give us some further monies, but we can't guarantee that at this stage.
Okay. Are there any questions to the Director? No. Looks like you're getting away lightly, Caroline.
Yay, thank you. Or I've just bamboozled you with numbers.
Well, no, you've done such a good job of explaining it that everyone is satisfied that they know exactly where we are. I think you should take it that way.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, in that case, I thank you for your update. And if we can move on to item 5, which is the impact of COVID-19 on mental health services. Who's going to present this update?
Chair, if I take my leave, thank you.
Of course. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
So I'm going to lead on this. I'm Mark Creelman. I'm the new locality director for Merton and Wandsworth at South West London CCG. I replaced James Blythe, who's gone off on secondment, so I'm here for the next 18 months, backfilling James. I've invited.
Before you go any further, Mark, can I welcome you?
Thank you very much. That's most welcome, Chair. So be gentle with me as well.
Not sure about that. I can't. No guarantees there, but you're very welcome to join us.
I've also invited Ranjit from the Mental Health Trust, so that we can, if there are any questions about some of the detail, Ranjit's on hand to answer that, and he'll give you a flavour of some of the prevention stuff. I think I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes, if that's okay, and then hopefully have questions and answers. A little bit shorter. Okay, I'll be very quick. So what I'm going to just run through is the different areas of mental health and what COVID has done. So in primary care and improving access to psychological therapies, that's your common mental health problems. We have a service called IAPT, and it's integrated with our wellbeing and primary care recovery services. What we did see during COVID is in January, a marked drop in referrals, but that was kind of just at the time lockdown happened. But what we have seen now is that actually from the rest of the year and in June of this year, numbers were actually higher than they were last year. So actually what we are seeing is twofold. I think we're seeing more demand on services, but actually increased capacity as well. For staff, we have accessed more therapists. We put more online options, obviously, so that people can access therapy online. But it's really important to emphasize, face-to-face still happens where it is clinically appropriate and clinically able to be done so. In secondary care and early intervention into psychosis, that's services in the community for anyone over 14. Experiencing their first psychosis. Again, there's more staff there, the more psychologists, more consultants, and more care coordinators. From April to August of this year, we have seen a 69% take up of that service than last year. So a real increase in demand. But reassuringly, waiting list targets have been achieved. So actually the service has really kind of worked very hard to maintain its standards. In urgent and emergency care, we've got obviously the emphasis is to try and stop people presenting at emergency departments. We've got the Orchid Suite at Springfield Hospital, which is the mental health emergency service. That basically takes referrals from all services and professionals, including London Ambulance and psychological liaison referrals. And it's staffed, and it has been very busy, 3 times more busy than it was previously in terms of just psych liaison services. So again, real increased demand. The other crisis service is the crisis line, which is a 24/7 open to everyone telephone service, supported by more staff now, and every shift has qualified clinicians. And again, referrers, callers can dial into that service for emergency care. In Merton, we continue with the Sunshine Cafe, the crisis cafe in Merton, but again had to change the operating model so that actually it's a virtual, but face-to-face again where necessary. We've just had a meeting with some of the health and wellbeing board subcommittees, particularly around children and young people's services. The South West London had an online resource and developed an online resource which was a kind of one-stop shop for all mental health resources and young people. But I think particularly in Merton, there's been a really good story to tell for young people, and that's the off-the-record counselling support and self-harm support. It's both online and virtual. It can be drop-in, but also again doing that virtually. And they've also done creative things like webinars, etc., to make as many of the demand as possible. We've also got a service called CUTH, which again is counselling for 11 to 22-year-olds. And that's really kind of tapped into schools as well. So schools have direct access into the CUTH service. So there's a link between the schools and mental health. Lots of resources have been developed on the feedback from young people, including things like coping with lockdown, LGBT issues, BAME issues, how to deal with isolation. And the Trailblazers programme, which is mental health support in schools. In Merton, there's 22 schools signed up to that, and the staff actually work in schools. Whilst schools were stood down, there was an online delivery mechanism and workshops again. Finally, CAM services, there's a crisis helpline and a mental health trust helpline. Self-referral pilots have been extended due to COVID. And actually, really interestingly, things like training and mental health first aiders in schools have been developed. And that's actually having someone in school who is exactly what it says on the tin, a mental health first aider. So anyone that's anxious, depressed, etc., can access the school service almost immediately. I'm going to shut up then, and I'll pass to Ranjit. Did I miss anything, Ranjit?
No, thank you, Mark. I'm Ranjit, Director of Communications at South West London St George's. I just want to also say that Merton has been a real ally in terms of the work that's happening around COVID and mental health. On the 20th of July, we held a summit across the whole of South West London. I've seen many friendly faces here, and I won't embarrass colleagues, but thank you very much for your support on behalf of the Mental Health Trust for being involved in that summit. We had 500 people join us. We had 5 pledges, which was about supporting the work around prevention and mental health promotion in the community, which we've delivered on. On the 10th of November, we're hosting another summit. We've now joined across the whole of South London with our 3 partner mental health trusts, Oxley's, NHS Foundation Trust and South London and the Maudsley, along with all the councils across South London. And we would certainly invite members of Merton to be able to attend that. I appreciate that we're short of time, so I probably will just pause there and ask for questions to Mark and myself.
Thank you, Ranjit. Is this your first visit to our committee, our panel?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
In that case, it would be very remiss of me not to welcome you as well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your brief presentation. I've got a question that kind of occurred when I was listening to all this, and it's one that kind of arises from what I'm hearing in the media about the impact of COVID and on mental health. Do we track suicides in the area, and are you able to say whether there has been an increase during this period?
We do track suicides, but what we're seeing evidence at the moment is that there hasn't been an increase at this precise moment due to COVID, but that will be a longitudinal piece of work. What we certainly do know is that there is an impact on people's mental health of people who are not known to services. There's a piece of work developed by the Centre for Mental Health which predicts that 20% of the population will have some form of mental health as a result of COVID. Okay,
thank you. Well, I'm pleased to hear that there's no evidence of that thus far, but you're right. I mean, it's something that may occur down the line. Do other members have questions? Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's on that. There is a worry, of course, that within the population generally there'll be an increase in adverse mental health conditions affecting people, but because people know that the NHS in general is under pressure because of COVID, then it's possible that a lot of people who are suffering possibly lower level mental health issues are not seeking help for that for those reasons, because they believe at this time the NHS is under pressure and they shouldn't bother people. Again, with the stigma around mental health and everything else that goes with it, that people are less likely to come forward and say that they have problems. And do we think, and are we planning towards, say 6 months, 9 months, whenever it is, that we say we are coming out of COVID, that we'll suddenly get a really large influx of people coming in saying, I've had mental health issues for quite a while, but I didn't approach you before because COVID was overwhelming the NHS, but now it's over, I'm coming to you. And are we planning for a big influx in cases in maybe 6 or 9 months' time?
I'll start the response, Ranjit. So I think one of the key things from the NHS is the message that we are open. And, you know, there have been national campaigns, there have been local campaigns, but we also look to our partners to emphasize that the NHS is open, whether it be mental health services or acute services or community services. So it would be really great if we all go out with the message that you should still be accessing the care that you need to, but you might have to access it in a very different way. I think Councillor Ward, you do raise a really important point, and what some of the conversation we had previously in the previous meeting was about how do we really tap into our communities and people like our faith leaders, etc., to encourage people that perhaps don't necessarily come forward to traditional services, and actually really encourage them into their community, supporting them in accessing services that are delivered in a way that are appropriate for that community as well. So we've got a piece of work to do there, really, and I think Merton has done fantastic work around engagement, but we can take it even further and really drive through a different range of services using our community and our community voluntary sector. I think there's always the risk that actually at the end of it you do see an influx of people, and we've seen that probably both in mental health and physical health after phase 1 of COVID. And that's something, again, all this messaging, we need to really make sure that people feel comfortable in coming forward and safe in coming forward, knowing that the services are there for them. Ranjit?
Yeah, absolutely. A really good response from Mark, who's covered all the main points. So just to say that a part of our prevention work is fundamentally listen to the communities and look at community capacity building. So from the 10th of November to the mid-February 2021, we're doing a major listening campaign working with our faith communities, schools, leaders, and the public to be able to understand actually what do they need, what support can we put in place as a system around their mental well-being. And so the ambition is that in April 2021 we'll be able to have a full programme of support, and we're working across South London to do that, and we're also working with Thrive London around that offer as well. So we're very cognizant of that. So Councillor, I'm glad you raised that question.
Any others? Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question around sort of in light of us moving into a second national lockdown shortly, because we know that there will no longer be formal shielding guidance, despite one would assume the risk remaining the same. I would assume that might cause quite a lot of anxiety for people who would be deemed sort of clinically extremely vulnerable. So it was just a question about whether you expect that to also be the case, and I suppose what else we can be doing to support those residents.
Tom, do you want to respond to this specific point?
I do, but I was going to update on shielding later on in the presentation, but if you want me, I can do it just now, or do you want me to wait and I'll update you on the other things as well?
Are you happy to wait, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Okay, we won't forget.
Can I just mention one other thing, Chair, as well? It was back to the very good point you'd raised about suicides. Our Adult Safeguarding Board is currently monitoring all suicides coming through the Trust just now. So when there's a suicide, the Trust tend to do a serious incident report. A whole chain of reports are done. It gets sent to us and we're monitoring those just now to see if they're connected to COVID or not. So the Safeguarding Board is actually monitoring them at the moment.
And is that something that you can keep us informed of as this continues?
I think what I was planning to do, if it's okay with you, Chair, when we take the safeguarding report, the annual safeguarding report, will update on the data from all the different services. So we'll update on adult social care data, we'll update on SIs from the Trust, we'll update on the DHRs, those domestic homicides. So I'll bring them all together at the same time, if that's okay.
Thank you, that makes sense. Jennifer.
Yes, thank you. It's regarding the mental health first aider in schools. Can you just give us a little bit more detail who that person is? Are they a dedicated person that comes in, or is it training that teachers have received? How parents or children access this? Thank you.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can answer to my best ability on that, Councillor. So Merton was one of the boroughs that was lucky enough to be a trailblazer scheme for CAMS. An investment was made around about £1.6 million in schools' mental health. So each school has a lead for mental health who is mental health qualified and trained. And that package of support is to be able to support young people with their mental well-being. And it's also about looking at how do we support people early, and if they need care and treatment, where do they go to in the right place? And there's also support available for families as well. Mental health first aid is one of those packages that are available, but there's a number of other tools available as well. And I'd be happy to share information with the committee on more details on that if councillors would like.
And just to say, so I'll just add that in terms of probably one area of mental health that I didn't touch upon, but it is worth just mentioning, is around staff. So staff in health and social care that have been through almost a year now of COVID and the challenges of both business as usual and COVID. And mental health, certainly mental health first aiders is something in health that we have adopted as well. And so there are people peppered around the organisation who are available to support people who are feeling particularly anxious or depressed and navigate them to the right services.
Okay. Any other questions? Mary.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Ranjit or Mark for any advice. A lot of the older people are having panic attacks indoors because of this lockdown, and I wonder if there's any advice you can offer us in the community to help them. Thank you.
I'm happy to start, Mark. So I think what we would certainly do is to be able to provide you with some contact details for people to get in touch. We recognise that this is a very strange time for a lot of people in the community, and what we want to be able to do is to give people the tools. So we will be able to support people in some way, shape or form around that, whether that's a ability to be able to handle that anxiety. So I'm happy to supply more information on that and to put you in touch with our consultant psychiatrist for older people services, counsellor.
Thank you.
I would probably just add that many of our older people's contact with services is via their GP and their GP practice, and the Mental Health Trust and our primary care networks are also working together in kind of having access at a frontline kind of primary care service, so that people can access it relatively quickly. So I would also be encouraging people still to use their primary care facility, particularly if it's about kind of anxiety and the kind of lower level mental health issue.
I think it's worth pointing out, Mark, that Councillor Curtin, Mary Curtin, has links with Friends in St Helier, very strong links, which is a group that looks after older people in our community. And I think it would be useful for her to have those details so that if she picks up a case that is of concern, that there is a mechanism to get this moving and summon urgent help if that is felt to be required. So it would be helpful to get those details. And I guess if you can email them to Stella, Stella can then pass them on to Mary, and I think that would be very useful. Can I ask another question? Mark, when you were talking about the performance of your services, you kind of you said that there'd been significant increases in the demand, and yet you'd still been achieving your target, which is commendable. What I wanted to ask is, have you been provided with extra resources in order to meet this increased demand?
So I think it probably goes back to the previous conversation about what is COVID expenditure and what's kind of business as usual expenditure. So certainly health services have had access to COVID funding, central COVID funding. I think certainly from a CCG perspective, as we are coming out of it and some of that money becomes limited longer term, we will have financial challenges going forward, which you know, lots of our savings initiatives didn't happen because of COVID, but we did have access to central funds.
And the funds that you've been given have been sufficient in the year 2021 to meet the increased demand. Is that what you're saying?
So I think probably, I think that without being political about this, I think probably the jury is still out, because we are still kind of counting the money that is being spent and also seeing the impact that COVID does have on business as usual services as well, because some of those have had to change quite fundamentally, and some of the increases in staffing, etc., we are still having to do that and work in very different ways. So I think we have had access to funding. We have a pot of COVID funding going forward. I suppose as guardians of the taxpayers' money, we're challenged to make that balance. But actually, you know, I wouldn't give a political answer in terms of whether it was enough. We've certainly been giving access to it, and we're working that through.
But you're not experiencing the same level of shortfalls that our Director of Corporate Services was describing earlier on.
So certainly as a CCG, we are experiencing gaps, absolutely, because lots of hospitals had private income. Lots of hospitals had car parks that generated quite a lot of money, and actually they've lost that. So we, from central funding, we can absolutely cover the cost of NHS services. What we've not been able to do is cover the cost of private services. So there are gaps across the CCG and the health sector.
Okay. Are there any questions, any other questions from members? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that update. I think it's important for this panel to recognise the work that has been done during this period and the increased demand. And if you could take back to your colleagues who are working in this service our thanks and best wishes, because you know, they are doing very important work, and we need to recognise that.
And I'd probably just say that mental health services are our partnership working with the local authority, the Mental Health Trust and health services. So it is a partnership approach that works.
You've already made that point, and we're grateful for that acknowledgement. But I still think it's important to say thank you to you and your team. And I really would welcome, you know, you taking that message back from us.
We certainly will do. Thank you very much for that, Chair.
Okay, right. So item 6 is the verbal update from the Director of Public Health. Dagmar, I'm surprised you're not falling asleep. The amount of work you must have been undertaking over the past few months, but you're looking well. Despite the heavy workload, and I'll ask you to provide us with your verbal update. You've got some slides.
Yes, so thank you very much, and apologies. I think Rebecca has heard me using the same slides.
Well, if at some point, to make sure she's been paying attention, you should stop and ask her to continue.
All right, I will let her off this time. If you give me the next slide, Stella, please. So what I would like to do is give you a brief overview of where we are with our pandemic in Merton. This is a very busy overview slide, and I won't drag you into the details. I just wanted to give you a reminder what we are looking as our particular important indicators. It is 7-day infection rates per 100,000 population. It is particularly, and that is what worries me, the over 60s infection rate over 100,000. And then we look at test positivity, because the more test percentage is positive, the more you've got in the community. So these are our trio of warning signs, and unfortunately all 3 are creeping up. Now, these reports, although they are pretty up to date, there's always a bit of a lag, as you can imagine. The latest news looks for London a little bit more promising than I have been recently, as the steep increase that we've seen in London seems to level off a little bit. We are still increasing, but there might be a hint of some leveling off. I will, if you give me the next slide, I will show you a little bit more. So Merton is not alone, and we're part and parcel of London, and for people, borough boundaries don't matter, and nor do they for viruses. So we look at Merton in the round, and it is very interesting. Not long ago, I used this slide, which I call the tiles, the London tiles, and everything was beautifully green, maybe a little bit yellow, nothing else. And now you see that we've basically run out of color. We thought red was the last, that the most dramatic, and we are over 100,000 in most boroughs. So as Rachel said, it looks bruised. London looks bruised. And if you actually can see some of the details, so infections have rocketed up to 200 per 100,000 over 7 days. That is Hammersmith, the highest at the moment. But Merton is there also in the bruise. If you move us on. This is the slide that I've already mentioned. The over 60s make me particularly worried, because we know that age is such an important indicator for severe COVID. And what happens is, once you've got infection in this age group, then you can expect that your hospital admissions will go up. And again, a lot of red, some bruising already. So that is quite a daunting outlook for London. If you move me on. This slide very briefly shows you how we were sort of pottering along over the summer with a bit, and we were hunting down every case, and did actually quite effective tracing back. And then lo and behold, in the middle of December, we started to rocket up. And that's what we mean when things start to go exponentially wrong. And so hopefully the purpose of the restrictions, first the tiering system and then the restrictions, you will see a little bit more visually in what the purpose is, to get that flatter and not continuing in that steep increase. If you move us on. This is now a really important slide, because as we've heard, COVID in young people mostly is a mild disease. So you could say, what is all the fuss about? But as we obviously know, that is not the case for everybody, and in particularly for vulnerable people and those older age groups. So we monitor very much what is the harm through monitoring impact on the NHS. And you can see the confirmed COVID admissions, and at the bottom right, you can see ITU, which again is a refined indicator for severe COVID. Now, South West London is at the bottom. It's the turquoise line, so it's hovering. It's not jumping up yet. And it's certainly increasing, but not steeply. Now, whether and how the increase in the over 60s will translate, it leaves me with some trepidation. I'm hopeful, but not yet too hopeful to see we will not have more hospital admission. To all intents and purposes, we will have significantly more. If you move us on. There come a few slides now with some more bespoke local analysis, often issues that have been raised, for some from you, from councillors, from officers, and from the public. So if you move me on. So death, obviously, in the first wave, we've monitored death very closely. You probably will recognize the slide. You can still see the big shape that was in the spring. The yellow line shows you the death the year before, and you can see really we had some quite dramatic, tragic excess death. At the moment, in the second wave, we have 1 additional death so far, so touch wood. You will recognise that we had 205 and now we have 207, so the other additional death that has now appeared in our registration had actually occurred at the tail end of the first wave in August, but only made it into our data set right now. If you move us on. This is an important slide because not too long ago there has been quite a lot of pressure on the testing capacity. So a lot of people asked me to try to give them a little bit of an understanding where people testing, who tests, how many tests. So the message that you all can take back is that testing capacity is up again. People were really put off. They were sent from pillar to post and miles away. That is not the case anymore. Everybody should get a test pretty close to their home immediately. Where there are still issues is the turnaround time. So that is often longer than the sort of aspired 24 hours. But tests are around and testing is going up. And we've now got a local testing site for walk-in as well at the college site. That is pretty well embedded now. If you move us on. This is important in terms of outbreaks and incidents. You can see that we have got a big chunk of our incidents in care homes. I'm glad to say that obviously, first of all, care homes are my biggest worry. We had a tragedy in the first wave. I absolutely am committed to do whatever I can to prevent that from happening again. We have regular staff and resident testing established. It is not 100% wonderful in terms of turnaround times, but it is happening regularly. And all the ones that we've picked up, and it's a big chunk of our incidents, are asymptomatic staff and residents. So we haven't had a single symptomatic one. It is an area of high concern if community transmission is high, and we know the infection is transmitted by asymptomatic people. We will have staff affected. So the regular testing is crucially important. If you move us on. This obviously for Merton really important that we keep an eye on East-West and what is the divide about. You will remember that in terms of deaths in our first wave, initially we had quite a disproportionate impact on the East that leveled out towards the end of the first wave. So we're keeping a close eye, but you can see the blue and red lines, so crossing over several times. So I think at the moment the jury is probably out, but I will keep monitoring for you. If we move on. This is an important one. This is the one that worries me most. As I already said, we're keeping a really close eye on where are the infections in terms of age groups. You can see the bright orange, it's called the heat map on the right-hand side. These are the youngsters that have the infections. So that bright orange is getting a little bit lighter, but it's bleeding into the older age groups now. And once it's in the working age groups, they are branching between kids and older people quite often because they care for kids and they care for their parents. Then you have an issue. Then it normally it goes further. So watch that space. If you move me on, nearly done. This one was an interesting one because it captured the imagination of a lot of people. It's around students and how much potentially infected students could contribute to our local data who actually study elsewhere. We haven't got the precise data. We had to do some crafty work to see where people of the age for 18 to 21, so student age, where they would take their test. And lo and behold, quite a number have actually tasted in university towns in the north with very high rates. So there is an assumption that in that age group, whole spikes, particularly from West Merton, were probably students not in Merton. Overall, though, that effect is already fading, and it doesn't make a big difference to our numbers. If you move us on. So that's a quick canter through, and Rebecca very wisely and spot on has already asked me to present next time round a little bit more of a deep dive on ethnicity. So I am now gathering data. I haven't quite got it already, but it's very well said, and we are on the case to look at ethnicity. This is just for your reference. In the tiered restrictions at the moment, we're still in tier 2, which is high, but obviously expecting to go into national lockdown from Thursday. That's me done.
Well, thank you, Dagmar. I think that was you gave us a lot of information. One of my questions when you were showing us the deaths in care homes, I was looking at the boroughs who were sort of higher up on the left-hand side of the diagram, and I was trying to work out whether this was because as I understood that slide, it was about deaths in care homes. I'm sure that there are some boroughs where there are more care homes, and therefore that would be expected, or is that sort of kind of aggregated out so that if there are twice as many care homes in Croydon as there are in Sutton, then it's weighted, or is that just the crude number?
So I didn't show you a slide with deaths in care home. I showed you a slide with infections over 60. Yeah. You're absolutely right that there are some boroughs that have more older people, but therefore what we're doing is per 100,000 population of older people. Right. So we're presenting it as a percentage of the population of over 60s.
Okay. And sorry, I was trying to keep up with it, and it was.
I know, and I do apologise.
No, I mean, don't apologise, because you've given us a very comprehensive view of what's going on, and there's a lot of information on each slide. So when you get old like me, you have difficulty keeping up. So
feel free once you've seen the slides, and if there are questions, then do send them over. I understand that giving you all that information in one go without sharing them before is a bit difficult, but I wanted them updated. So by all means, send us questions.
Okay. Dave, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, a number of those graphs showed low level after the initial wave in March, April, May, and going down that, and now starting to creep upwards again, or even more creeping upwards again. Given the fact that the new national lockdown isn't coming into place for another 2 days from now, and we know about the lag time in terms of infections and then and how it spreads in the population. Are we expecting that those numbers are likely to go up for at least another 2 weeks until the effects of this lockdown hopefully kick in and it then levels off or starts coming down? Basically, with the lockdown only coming in still another 2 days' time compared to when Sage first recommended, and I'm sure this is not a question for you, but do we expect the numbers to go up for at least another 2 weeks before we start getting a levelling off, if we see a levelling off due to this next lockdown?
Yes, I think that's a very fair point and absolutely spot on. In the aim of the restriction, as you will have heard, is to get this magic R number down, the R number being the average number that an affected person infects. And if that's over 1, we don't need to be mathematicians. It's pretty clear then it goes up, and the more, the steeper. So the ambition is obviously to get the R number below so that would mean the infection is shrinking. But even if we reduce the R number and flatten the infection, and over the winter then can hold it at a more, almost bearable level, like we cope with flu during the winter, that would be seen as a success. Where people started to really get, I think, scared was when the curve started to exponentially rocket up, because then to contain it becomes very, very difficult, because as you understand, almost 50% of the infections are asymptomatic. So once you have high infection rates, it can run out of control very quickly.
Any other questions from members? Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Dagmar, I'm still seeing quite a few people in supermarkets, shops, etc., not wearing masks. How can we, or how can you, or whoever's in charge, mandate masks so as people, wouldn't be allowed in without wearing them?
Yeah, so I think, Mary, we all have probably experienced similar scenes. One of the issues that you will have heard is shop assistants and people in shops saying it's very difficult for us because obviously there is the exception option, and you will have heard there's quite a lobby as well that says we feel very stigmatized when we have legitimate reason not to wear a mask. So unraveling who can and who cannot and who is an exception is very, very difficult. So as we've discussed before, with all the restrictions, the trick in a way is to find a happy balance between sort of civic duty and getting the community to want to do this and adhere, and enforcement for those who blatantly violate. And around masks, this is particularly tricky. Giving you other examples, we've put our first notice out to a bar that blatantly was disregarding the social distancing, and the police helped us and they visited and we took all the evidence. So there it was clear cut, and we used the collaboration with our police to actually go for enforcement. But for individual shops with individual masks, it's very tricky. But again, I will raise it again because we are constantly having the rapport with our environmental health officers as well, who have some role in sort of enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So just picking up on that point, Dagmar, I was in a shop earlier this week, and there was a security man on the door, and he had a mask on, and just in front of me a young man walked in with no mask, and there wasn't any attempt to say where's your mask, or we need you to put your mask on. And so I said to him, why didn't you ask? And he said, I'm not the police. And I said, I'm not asking you to be the police, I'm just asking you to protect me as a shopper. And as I looked up, there were two guys coming out, young men again, both of whom had no mask on. So I'd seen three people, one going in and two coming out, none of them with masks on. So my response then was to say, okay, if you're not prepared to look after me, I'm not prepared to continue to shop here. And I turned and went to another shop. That's, I guess, all you can do. But he didn't say...
Sorry for interrupting. You might have seen that we are working on community marshals. It's a little bit of an awkward term, but we've received, all local authorities received some specific funding to equip people from the community to be visibly available. We've turned it from enforcement more to a community engagement function. but understanding people's questions, answering questions, and challenging is the role. And we have had some collaboration from London. MHCLG was running some pilots, and we volunteered. So over the weekend, we had people in vests just being visibly around. The businesses liked it a lot because they were there handing out some leaflets, friendly faces, but also in a way reminders for people to adhere. So we're trying all sorts of ways to encourage and for civic duty, in a way, to do a bit of self-regulation as well.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the panel? Okay, well, look, I'm very grateful to you for your update and for the information you've provided, and also for the work that you have been undertaking on our behalf over many months. And like your colleagues from the mental health NHS people, I'd like you to take that message back to your team and thank them for all the work they're doing on behalf of our community, which is so important at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that concludes item 6. Item 7 is the work programme, which is printed on pages 5 to 10. Can we note that, oh, sorry, John.
You forgot about me and shielding.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, there I was. About
if you don't want me, it's fine.
No. We value your contribution, so please go ahead
okay,
and briefly.
And Chair, I'll take my leave after John.
I'll try and be brief. So on the 3rd of November, at the last scrutiny, I updated you all on our preparations for shielding if it was going to be reinstated, our preparations for our hospital discharge if we were in preparation for the second wave. And I'm just coming back to update you on those before I finally update you on a very good news story, which is the Warm and Well programme in Merton, which is about preventing people going into hospital and supporting our really vulnerable clients. So I won't go into the same detail as I did at the last scrutiny, but I'll just give you a very quick recap. So at the end, when shielding was paused on the 31st of August, we had 7,200 people shielding in Merton. We had 40 staff, council staff from libraries, from our leisure centres, and a number of other staff working with that shielding cohort. When shielding was paused, those staff went back to their regular jobs, and we commissioned the community hub, who were already commissioned to work with people who weren't shielding, who needed support in the community. We commissioned them to also provide our shielding component of our work as well. Since August, we've been getting regular daily guidance from Department of Health and Government on what shielding was likely to look like, and we've been preparing for that. We've been preparing for full shielding, that's all of the people on the list, or a hybrid. We've had both plans in place. It is likely the hybrid that is going to be enacted. Now, I'm saying that based on lunchtime's data, but I've had another 5 emails since I last looked, so things are changing daily. But at the moment, it is a hybrid, and I'll take you through what that means and what we're planning. So since shielding was paused, we have been getting weekly drops of data from the Department of Health. So we still have today approximately 7,200 people on our shielding list. That's not exactly the same one as we ended in August. The number's the same, but a lot of the people are different. So people have been added and removed over the last couple of months. Those drops will now be daily. So we will have daily drops with people removed and added that we will have to work with. We've screened those people, we've been working with them, we know who we are. So we've got very good detail up until last week, on last week's data, on who they are, what sort of support needs they have, what sort of support they would need around food, around medication, around all the other things. We've been doing that planning. So the changes, it was the extremely clinically vulnerable. That expression has now changed, so I'm going to get slightly tongue-tied. They are now speaking about CEV, the clinically extremely vulnerable. That is the shielding list of 7,200. What is going to happen? They are not planning, the government are not planning to reintroduce full shielding for all 7,200 people. People who are working in shielding are going to be asked not to work from home where possible, and where that isn't possible, they will receive statutory sick pay to enable them not to work and to shield at home. The other people, the other group, are going to be asked to be more careful. So to protect themselves, to wear masks, to be more careful with hand gel, to certain times that they won't have to, they shouldn't be going out, staying out of big crowds. We're not fully sure what they're going to be told yet. That's likely what they're going to be told. But a letter is going to be going out this week to all of the shielding group in Merton, across England, but in Merton, advising them what to do. Our community hub is up in place. That is the number that people will have to contact if they need support. So I will also be writing a letter to our shielding group based on all the different categories, advising them to contact the hub. But we also have a group of people that we know will need more support, and within that, and we've got plans in place for them as well. The other change that is likely to happen as well, there's a new category. I'm going to get confused as I say it. The extremely clinically vulnerable, that is what the shielding cohort were called before. That is people over 60. They are also going to be written to as well and asked not to shield, but to be really extra careful. They're going to be asked to stay out of the crowds, do their shopping at different times, use their masks and their hand gel, and wash their hands and things as well. Now, while shielding isn't going to be fully implemented at this time again, we are expecting more people to come through our community hub, and we have got plans in place to support that if needed. So the community hub is commissioned by the council from the voluntary sector. They are running at half capacity just now. So they're getting about 50 to 60 calls a week, and then the subsequent work that needs. They've got capacity for 100. We've got daily calls with our Rob Clark, the Chief Executive of Age UK, to ensure that we know if the numbers are going up and if they need more resources. And if they do need more resources, it's across the CMT to ask for those resources from the council. I would be asking for the people that were working, or some of the people that were working on shielding before, because they're aware of the caller system, they're aware of shielding, they're aware of our database, and that's the most logical thing to do. The other thing I was just going to quickly update you on is hospital discharge. So the last time I was here, I was telling you about our planning for the surge, for the second wave. And I told you about the 4 pathways that we were looking at. Pathway 0 are the people that are going home with no care. Pathway 1, people going home with care packages. And we've been working with our provider to ensure capacity so that we didn't have capacity in our reablement team, and with our providers so that we were able to get people out of hospital appropriately on time with the correct care package. And pathway 2 and 3 is around intermediate care and rehab beds and long-term residential and nursing care. I haven't got much to update on that other than we are now in the second surge. The numbers in our hospitals aren't as high as they normally are during the winter, during this period, because we've had really lower numbers going to hospitals over the last few months. But we can see an increase in people going to hospital and an increase in people being discharged. So we really are in that second wave now, with more people, still not large numbers of people being discharged with COVID, but you can see more people with COVID now coming out of hospitals. The final thing I just wanted to update you was a really good news story, and that was about the Warm and Well Merton campaign. We commissioned from the voluntary sector, from Wimbledon Guild and Age UK, a programme where we were assessing people in the community that needed some support around heating, to make their houses warmer and more comfortable, to give energy advice, to help people claim for benefits, to help people claim for grants to get their heating repaired or replaced. And I just wanted to give you some of the numbers around that. So since March, they have seen, they've assessed over 600 people for the Warm and Well programme. They've, it's 636. They've helped, they've helped a number of people claim for benefits, and from April to September, they've helped people get an extra 137,000 in extra benefits to help them with their pay for their heating and pay for their bills and increase their income. There's 77 people they've helped apply for grants, to help them apply for grants that could be for new boilers or insulation for their properties and things. That's only the data from April to September. That isn't the full year, but it's been proving very successful already for the number of referrals and the results that they're achieving for those clients. It is working across the east and the west of the borough. It's across the whole borough, but of course there's a larger need with more deprivation in the east, so more of the success and more of their work is in the east of the borough. That was all I wanted to update on today. You asked me to be quick, so hopefully that was quick enough.
Thank you, John. I'm grateful for that update. Again, a lot of information in there. Any questions to John? Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that Rebecca wanted her question asked as well. The long-term COVID sufferers, I wonder, are they able to access the community hub if they are in need of assistance during a lockdown?
Yes, it's the hub is there for anyone in the community. So My Merton is going out again. I think it's either this week or next week. The first 6 or 7 pages is about COVID, and one of the pages is giving all of the details of the hub and what they can do. So yes, it's open for any resident that needs some support during this time.
Thank you.
Rebecca?
I think John answered my question as part of his report, so I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, in that case, I did start on item 7, the work programme. Can we note the work programme?
Noted.
Okay, well, that concludes our agenda and our meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Sorry, Dave, you want to speak? Oh no, you're just waving goodbye.
No, just very briefly. We have an AGM of the council in a week or so's time, and after 2.5 years, I'm not going to be any longer a member of this committee. I just wanted to wish my fellow councillors, and particularly officers who work so hard on these areas, and Peter, who will continue chairing this committee, the best of luck in the future. And I'm going to miss these meetings, but I have other responsibilities to take on. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, and we wish you well with your other responsibilities, and I'll leave that as a surprise for the council meeting. That there is no other business, so I'll declare the meeting closed, and thank you all for your contribution. I can't even say safe journey home, but enjoy the rest of the evening.